Hi everybody, Kareen Erbe here with Broken Ground, and today I want to talk to you about pest and weed management strategies in your garden. And what I'll do is I'll address these strategies in general terms, and then we'll take a tour of some of my garden beds so you can see these principles in action. So in terms of pest management, one of the first things that you want to consider is this concept of using and valuing diversity, which I repeat over and over again, it seems. And the idea behind that is that you are wanting to plant a diversity of different vegetables, say, in one garden bed, in one area. So instead of a monocrop of, say, broccoli, you might plant a diversity of different things in that, say, 4x8 garden bed. And in addition to that, you might include some flowers that attract beneficial insects into that garden space. So I'm sure a lot of you have used perhaps marigolds in your garden to attract beneficial insects. Some other flowers to consider are things like chamomile, cosmos, cilantro, dill, buckwheat, and sunflowers. And there, of course, are a variety of different other flowers that you could also plant into that system. So you can have flowers within your garden beds, then you can also create beneficial insect borders in your gardens as well, and these might be perennial flowers. So you may have a couple 4x8 garden beds, but then beside them you might have an area where you grow lemon balm, where you grow echinacea, where you grow bee balm. So again, this whole idea in creating and treating your garden as an ecosystem is to mimic a natural ecosystem that has a diversity of different species. And what this does is it confuses pests, it deters pests, and it attracts beneficial insects, and also contributes to the overall health of your garden area. So again, those are some of those general concepts in terms of pest management. Definitely think about diversity within your beds, and if you can't do it within your bed, diversity between your beds, or flowers that attract beneficial insects that are near your beds. So in terms of weed management, a couple strategies that you want to keep in mind are planting densely. So planting densely, not allowing that much space between your different plants. Obviously giving them the space that they need to grow, but not much more than that. Because in that way, the leaves themselves and the plant itself acts as a living mulch, right? And cuts down on the weeds, shades out the soil beneath it. And in addition to that, mulching in your garden beds. So whether that be with grass clippings or straw or leaves, you want to mulch the plants between the beds. And this accomplishes a couple things. It keeps in the soil moisture, and then of course it suppresses weed growth as well. So let's take a little tour of some of my garden beds to see some of these pest and weed management strategies in practice. So here's an example of a 4x8 bed that is planted with multiple species in this bed. So you can see here I have both golden beets and red beets, and then I do have some parsley growing between there, and then I have a trellis of peas. And then behind here, there are actually some volunteer sunflowers that came up that I decided to leave in the bed. And then I have spinach that I have harvested, and now I'm letting it go to flower. And I put it again on the north side of the bed so that the pea trellis could kind of shade some of that out. I have some lettuces down in there as well. And then if we go to the front here of the bed, or the side, so we have spinach on the right hand side, then we have the trellis of peas, then we have onions, then we have carrots. I did have radishes in here that I've harvested, and now they're giving more space to the carrots. And then I have some fennel here growing as well. Fennel is also a great, I may harvest some of this, but then it will go to flower, and that's also a great flower in the garden that attracts beneficial insects. So in this very small 4x8 bed, I've crammed a lot of things in. So I've also used the concept of planting densely. So I don't, you can see that the soil is shaded out, so I have to water less. And in areas where some of the soil is exposed, I have mulched between the beds. So this is a really great example of being able to attract beneficial insects. It's a diverse bed with all sorts of different things planted in it, and you don't have to water it very often. So here's an example of a bed that I have planted with winter squash, and in between I've planted buckwheat. So the buckwheat again attracts beneficial insects, but it also shades the soil. So again, providing multiple functions. So again, this is winter squash and buckwheat. And then here's an example of diversity between beds, not within a bed. So this is a whole crop of fava beans growing here, and it does make sense to have the fava beans all in one area, right? But then next to it, I have potatoes growing in the bed, and then next to that, I have some cabbages with buckwheat, and then there's some strawberries there on the berm. But again, a diversity between the beds, rather than within the beds. And then here's another simple 4x8 bed that has some summer squashes in it, and some tomatoes, and then finally some beans. So 3 different veggies in one garden space. The beans are of course fixing nitrogen. The tomatoes are planted densely enough so that their leaves are shading the soil below, cutting down on the moisture that we need, the water that we need. And then also the squash is doing the same. And then places where the soil is exposed, of course, I have mulched with some grass clippings. And then finally, here's a circular bed with mostly tomatoes in it. But below you can see that there is some volunteer borage, red orac, some clover, and some chives coming up. And what I do is that if these start to take up too much space, for example the borage gets kind of big, I'll just grab the leaves and I'll throw them back down in the bed, and then they'll act as mulch in the bed. So even though it's a monocrop of tomatoes up here, there are things that are surrounding it: borage, calendula, orac, more calendula over here, that attract beneficial insects, chives as well. And then there's a pathway, and then on the other side are more chives, more calendula, borage, sunflowers here, and then the pond area. So again, even though it's mostly tomatoes in this bed, they're surrounded by diversity. So just a few strategies for you to keep in mind this year and next as you plan your garden spaces. Again, strategies like this really cut down on the pests and enable you not to have to deal with pests throughout the season, because the ecology, the plants are doing it for you. So one last thing that I wanted to mention is if you want to get more information about natural pest control, there's this great book called Attracting Beneficial Bugs to Your Garden by Jessica Walliser. And it's a great book that talks about the pests that you might encounter in your garden and the associated flowers that would be useful to plant. So again, just another great book to add to your gardening library, and another way to build more of an ecological garden, so that the plants are doing the work for you. So thank you so much for watching, and let me know if you have any questions, and I look forward to seeing you soon.